Hello and welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman, and I'm joined by my spiky buddy Tyrone, the porcupine hobo. How you doing, man?
Well, Adam, unfortunately this week I had a very, very expensive car repair, so I'm feeling a little bankrupt.
You know what you should probably learn?
What's that?
Economics.
Oh, economics.
In
Woo!
possibly 1, 2, 3 lessons. By
My
Hunter
goodness. My goodness. All right, folks. Well, welcome back to our continuing series where we're reading through this excellent book called Economics in 3 Lessons. It's by Hunter Lewis, and we've been going through each lesson. We've been breaking it up into several episodes as part of some education, and we're going to pick up with the final part of Lesson 2, which is titled "The Essential Role of Loss and Bankruptcy." So I got to learn all about this.
You're learning already. This is wonderful.
All right, you want to preface anything before we dive in?
No, I'll have plenty to say as we go, but why don't you just dive right into Chapter 7?
All right, sounds good. Chapter 7, The Essential Role of Loss and Bankruptcy. Okay. The entire price and profit system is objectively scored. If you make investments, you either make a profit or you suffer a loss. There is no ambiguity about it, provided that accounting is honest. Enron. Government. If you suffer large enough losses, and especially if you have debts to repay, you may go bankrupt or have a car that breaks down. This is extremely important, as economist Wilhelm Röpke has explained. Quote, "Since the fear of loss appears to be of more moment than the desire for gain, it may be said that our economic system, in the final analysis, is regulated by bankruptcy." Unquote. So that's interesting. Regulated by bankruptcy. So what are we saying? We don't need government regulations? It is the special genius of the profit system that it persuades people to change, or at least to accept change, in order to win a profit or to avoid loss. Human beings are often reluctant to accept change, even when change is necessary or desirable. Governments and their bureaucracies are, as a general rule, notoriously unwilling to change. Why does the United States still maintain 54,000 troops in Germany in 2012? Okay, this is a little outdated. I'm sure we don't have that many troops anymore. Adam, why don't you quick Google that while I continue to read? I'd be curious.
What's the number?
He's saying in 2012, the U.S. had 54,000 troops in Germany. All right. At very great expense, so many years after the end of World War II and the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Germany spends barely more than 1% of its gross domestic product on defense, much less than the United States. Why is the once thriving city of Detroit bankrupt, with so many of its buildings boarded up or completely abandoned? Why do government leaders promise to balance their budgets but fail to reach agreement on how to do it and just keep falling deeper and deeper in debt, to the point that the debt can never realistically be repaid at all? The reason is that governments, even democratic governments, do not have any built-in mechanism to force needed change, as the profit system forces failing businesses to change. Very interesting.
And you're all wet, Tyrone. I mean, you think that government bureaucracies aren't motivated to change due to changing circumstances, but you are wrong.
Oh, I'm wrong.
Since 2012, they had 54,000, and they wisely added up the profit and loss and costs and the benefits of having soldiers there, and they lowered it to 35,000.
Oh, well, there you go. They're cutting left and right.
Intimidating the Hun and keeping him internally at bay, I assume.
35,000 troops. I wonder where those other troops went to. Maybe there's some other areas of the world being focused on. these days. But that's a great point, and you never really think about it. So businesses have a bankrupt, the threat of going bankrupt to force them to make changes. But governments, because they can just print money at will, they never go bankrupt. Or to put it maybe in a different way, governments, of course, can go bankrupt. They go bankrupt all the time. But when they go bankrupt, like, that's a whole different thing. That's not changing your business model. That's the end of, like, civilization, right? It's so. What do you have to say about that first part there of chapter 7?
Just that it's called a profit and loss system for a reason. And one of the most horrible things about government regulation is that it supersedes its own opinion about what regulation is supposed to be for the efficient market test of profit and loss. And it's a crying shame. It's why cronyism continues to run rampant. There's a quote, it might come up here in the book, but price manipulations and controls by government are often described as, quote, regulations, but they actually destabilize our economic and social system because they mess up that mechanism that's so vital for a market of prices and profits that tell actors where resources need to go, and losses, which tell actors where resources should not be going or that you're doing something wrong. And government just doesn't have that feedback mechanism. It can do whatever it wants so long as it has a tax base to steal from. And, you know, I'd much rather have profit and loss be the source of regulation than what? Like violent revolution to throw the government off of our backs or something?
Yeah.
One method is good and promotes civilization, and the other, as you say, it promotes destruction.
Well, going back to the previous chapters when talking about the role of prices, right? What is price? What is a price? It's a signal. It's an information to the businessman saying, you know, I should invest in this and not that because over here I get a higher price for something, right? So it's giving information of where to put scarce resources to work. When you have a monopolistic system, when you have a monopolistic entity like the federal government, there's no price because there's no competition. There's no resource competition. You know, when Walmart and Costco or Target or whomever, you know, are competing in the marketplace, you know, they have a price system to gauge how best to deploy their resources because they have to compete against each other, which is why we're anarcho-capitalists. So I think a lot of people misunderstand really what that means. For a lot of people, they just equate anarchy with chaos or whatever. But for us, it's really, you know, maybe we could come up with a better term, like a non-monopolistic capitalist system. In other words, what you and I want is to be able to purchase our government systems, you know, from competing government agencies. So, in our version of the world, you'd have government services company A, and over here you'd have government services company B, and they would compete against each other for your business to be your governance, your body of governance, you know, for your whatever you want to do. So there's no price system for the government.
Yeah, quite so. And even if you aren't willing to take it all the way to anarcho-capitalism like the porcupine and I are, you should want to take as much out of the government sphere as you can if you hate waste.
Mm-hmm.
Because the profit and loss system that we're talking about here, the threat of bankruptcy, makes every actor in the private sphere trying to be as lean and efficient as they possibly can. They want to. They know they have to do things, provide services. They know they have to organize inputs and create products and services and promote them to the customers. But they want to do that as efficiently as possible. So they're always looking for ways to do it cheaper. It's part of the reason we get human progress. But the actors in the government bureaucracy have the exact opposite incentive. The last thing they want to do is shrink the number of people that they employ, the number of resources they command. Every bureaucrat wants their fiefdom to grow. That's how you show how important you are. And there's absolutely no incentive anywhere for anything to happen to budgets except for them to expand, which means we get taxed more, and you should not like that.
Yeah. And the point he makes in this paragraph is that, why has government debt grown to the point where it's not realistic to pay the debt back because of the loss because there's no price system, there's no bankruptcy system, profit and loss system, but that's a good point that should not be overlooked, that we are beyond the point of paying this back. There's only one road from here on out. It's bankruptcy. So the United States will go bankrupt. It's going to happen very, very soon. I know libertarians have been saying that for a long time, but I guarantee, folks, by 2032, it's over. So
that's the number?
Yeah, that's when
2032? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Walter Williams made that prediction probably 20 years ago. And it still holds up today. I just checked the numbers recently. But he said in 2032-ish, right around then, is when Social Security runs out of money. That's it. It's over.
Well,
when that happens, that's it. The whole thing falls apart. So it is scheduled to go still 2032. Some say 2033. Anyway, it's close. So that'll be the first stage. They'll start reducing benefits. They'll raise taxes. They'll have no choice. And at that point, it'll just be a few years after that before it's all over.
I mean, you're just not thinking like a government economist, Tyrone.
Oh, right. Sorry.
The answer to this was given to us in the 70s, I believe, by that great economics film Logan's Run.
Oh, yeah!
All we need to do to save Social Security is just start executing people when they get to a certain age. No fuss, no muss.
That's right. When senior citizens start dying because they can't afford food anymore.
I mean, why put them through that? Just one in the back of the head, right?
What was Logan's Run? Like when you reach
30?
30? It was 30 years old?
Yeah.
Boy, that's a pretty low number.
30. You can imagine all the people on the set who were like 35 and 40 going, ooh, this ain't good.
But obviously societies have recognized this age problem for all of human history. And, a great example is certain Inuit tribes in the Alaska or Canadian region, used to have this tradition of when people reached a certain age, they would have a ceremony and the old folks would walk out into the snow and, just pass away because they become a burden on the tribe.
The image that we have is they get pushed out on an ice floe.
Right.
And it's, we laugh and it's tragic, haha, these goofy backwards people, but I bet if resources are slim, older people really don't want to be a burden.
Oh, right.
And since we bring this up, when we don't want the government solving it because it's immoral and inefficient and all manner of bad, the way you're supposed to handle that is A, through living a responsible life, and B, through family and charity. And since we're not heartless bastards and we do, not counting the debt, seem to be a rich society, this shouldn't be a problem. There's no need to just ruin everything by inserting the government in there.
Yeah, well, when you debase the currency, it makes investment impossible.
Right.
And so then they had to come up with the security net of Social Security, which never needed it before until they started debasing the currency. Then that also disincentivizes people to invest because I got this safety net coming to me when I get older, right? I don't got to worry about it. Government's going to take care of me. So, I mean, it's going to be a disaster. I mean, I joke about the very expensive car repair. I mean, it does hurt, but fortunately, I have a good job, I make a good living, and I can afford it. It hurts means probably not going to go on a vacation. Oh no, first world problems, right? But you read statistics out there or polls, like there are a lot of people in this country that are like a $500 car repair bill away from being bankrupt. I mean, what are they going to do when Social Security goes bankrupt? I mean, give me a break. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Anyway, it's Black Pill episode today when learning about economics, I guess.
Well, I mean, the chapter's talking about the essential role of loss and bankruptcy. What are we supposed to be, chipper?
No, I guess not. All right. Folks want us to get on with the education, not hear us ramble. All right. The chapter continues on. Governments are also reinforced in their resistance to change by entrenched economic interests that benefit from the status quo. It is the industries of today, not the emerging industries of the future, that have money to spend on elections and thus access to government leaders. These entrenched interests use all of their influence with government to try to outlaw or at least slow down upstart competitors offering better ways of doing things. When they get into really deep trouble, they demand and receive public bailouts. I mean, what can you say about that? It's just, you see it over and over and over and over again. Remember in the 80s when Chrysler was bailed out by the government? I mean, what a joke.
It's from time immemorial, and you've heard the gambling phrase, freeze the ball?
No.
I mean, when your team gets ahead, you just don't want anything to change.
Oh.
Freeze the ball. Make it not move. And if you are an entrenched business interest, that's exactly what you want. Yeah. You wanted entrepreneurship and dynamism when you were on the up and up and taking over the market share from the old fuddy-duddies who used to have it. But then when you become the lion, hey, let's pass a few laws here to make sure that no one can come compete with us.
Yeah, our economic history in this country is littered with the ruins of many businesses that were crushed by large corporations going to their government crony friends, passing a new regulation, making something illegal. You have to have a license to do this, a license to do that. And worst of all is, Stephan Kinsella rightly points out, patents and trademarks, preventing anybody from using knowledge to create something new to compete. And it's really a shame, the world that we could have had. We should have had flying cars a long time ago, but instead we still got cars that break down and have less than 100,000 miles on them. So whatever. All right. And then they get bailed out, right? So I just said Chrysler, but obviously everybody's familiar with the GFC, the great financial crisis of 2008, where all the banks got bailed out. I mean, how many bailouts and bailouts and bailouts? It's just, whatever. All right, chapter continues. Passing laws to restrict such crony behavior is difficult enough. Enforcing them is impossible. Nor is it a panacea to break up the largest companies. There are economies of scale to be gained from large-scale production, so that an artificial limit on company size will just result in economic inefficiency and needlessly higher prices. These matters are best left to consumers to sort out through a truly free price system operating within a framework of competition. So there's a lot in this chapter. I feel like I just need to keep stopping, because obviously that's sort of going after antitrust laws, right, which we are completely against. Let a company grow as big as it wants to grow, merge with whomever it wants to merge. Why does the government have to regulate that? Go ahead.
I'm glad you paused there, because I was going to jump in. A lot of people, libertarians, say that without all the corruption in our government, specifically the laws that address corporations, that without all that, we would have much smaller companies. Companies wouldn't be the size that they are. And there's, to a certain extent, that's true.
Right.
But they reflexively think that all big companies are doing it wrong somehow, or are only big because of cronyism, and that's not true. Economies of scale is a real thing. We don't know in any particular industry or area what the right size of a business should be, or how much horizontal or vertical integration should be had, how much of the production of this product should be brought internal to one specific firm. Nobody can know that. That's exactly the sort of stuff that you need a free market with free prices for the market to determine. That's the only way you can know how big, quote unquote, a company should be. A regulator can't tell you, an economist can't tell you. Only the discovery mechanism that Hayek and Mises and others talk about all the time can tell you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, in a truly free economy, you would have a mix, right?
Yep.
You would have everything from very small companies, probably a lot of quote unquote medium-sized companies, and then probably a few very, very large companies. But and everybody thinks these large companies are like, oh, they're going to take over the world. But actually, the large company, you may say it's monopolistic. It has no competitor. But actually, it does. It has thousands of smaller companies competing against it all the time in little pieces here and there, right? So, even large companies have to compete in the market.
There is a natural disincentive to largeness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, economies of scale, is a real thing, but
Right.
pushing against that is the fact that the bigger you get, the more of the production you've integrated within your firm, the harder it is for you to solve Ludwig von Mises's calculation problem.
Correct.
How do you price things within departments?
Correct.
There have been books written and managerial techniques trying to make people sort of fake it, but it didn't work for the Soviet Union either, which means that if you're bloated like that, it's harder for you to operate efficiently. And in a free market with profits and losses, you will spin off components of your business when that truth has been demonstrated to you. That happens all the time.
Yep. Businesses spin off parts of their companies into other sub-companies all the time for this reason. I thought you were going to say the bigger they are, the harder they fall. All right, continuing on. Karl Marx recognized that the free price system pushes people to create or at least accept change. He did not like this, surprise, surprise, and characterized it as, quote, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and agitation, all fixed, fast frozen relations are swept away. All that is solid melts into air, unquote. So I think it really, I think for a lot of people of the Marxist bent, they really hate change. I mean, it really just comes down to that. They're just afraid of life. They're afraid that something's going to come along and they just want to, I don't know, do the same thing every day and then just die. They don't want anything to change. If it was up to Marx, we'd probably still be, I don't know, hunter gatherers or something. Whatever. But
no, you're absolutely right.
All right. So continuing on. Well, perhaps, but economic growth assumes change. Without change, the human race would still be hunting and gathering.
There you go.
Hey! It's almost like I read this in advance. Actually, I didn't. Very few of us would have been born or would have survived in such a precarious environment. Even so, at any given moment, the forces opposing change in a society are usually stronger than the forces favoring it. That's interesting. Outside of a free price and profit system, the only way to achieve change is through government coercion. This is unlikely because, as noted, governments usually oppose change. Even in the few instances where a revolutionary government demands change, whether for good or ill, it is not usually able to bend people to its will for very long. Human beings devise passive-aggressive strategies to resist orders from above. Sheer terror, as practiced by Stalin, can overcome this kind of resistance for a time. But even the most brutal methods will ultimately falter. And how can an economy possibly innovate, grow, and thrive in a climate of fear and murder? Russia and China recognized this when they finally abandoned the Stalinist and Maoist systems of terror, but each has still clung to residual methods of government control and coercion. It is not surprising that, as a result, Russian economic growth has been poor. Chinese economic growth is hard to gauge because of phony government statistics and also marred by tremendous environmental devastation. But as in Russia, the economy is beset by tremendous corruption, all of which continually threatens the economic gains that have been made through the reduction in terror. The most effective human regulation is self-regulation, regulation that people voluntarily choose for themselves. The free price system is the prime example of a self-regulatory system and the greatest success story in human history. Through a combination of carrots and sticks, it leads people to want to make the changes that ultimately improve our standard of living. Price manipulations and controls by government are often described as regulations, but to the degree that they undermine the natural regulation of the free price system, they actually destabilize our economic and social system. Human societies, economies require the additional regulation of a legal system. Okay, so this is interesting. So you had already sort of taken that quote just a few minutes ago. So I'll reread that one. Price manipulations and controls by government are often described as regulations, but to the degree that they undermine the natural regulation of the free price system, they actually destabilize our economic and social system. So now this next part's interesting. Human societies, economies require the additional regulation of a legal system. Interesting. Everyone needs to understand and abide by the rules of the game, but insofar as so-called government regulation undermines market regulation, it is dysregulating. So you and I might quibble or quarrel with that last piece insofar as he's obviously not an anarcho-capitalist, the author of this. He's obviously saying right there that there is a role for government to come in to set the rules, like if you were to play a game of chess. Somebody sets the rules for chess, but then once the rules are set, how you play is up to you, and how I play the pieces is up to me so long as we follow the rules. But somebody's got to come in and set the rules. You and I think, would say, nah, we don't need a government to set the rules either. We have other mechanisms for doing that.
I think you're absolutely right. He's not an anarcho-capitalist. He's a minarchist. That's fine. But the way he phrased it in the quote that I read, he isn't wrong.
Right.
Human societies, economies require additional regulation of a legal system.
Right.
Well, that's true, but it doesn't have to be a monopolist.
Correct. Yep.
We can have a legal system without one overarching tyrant setting that legal system.
Right.
But if you just adopt that minarchist framework, I'm not going to object, assuming it's a close to libertarian one. The problem is that government being a monopoly, the minarchist situation is incoherent and unstable. It will grow because it has no check on itself. Right. It is a power unto itself, and it will always metastasize.
All governments grow, period. That's their nature. So.
Yep.
All right, so now we're going to move on to Chapter 8, which is still part of Lesson 2 here. So Chapter 8 is titled, What About Inequality? Ooh.
What about it?
What about it? That's definitely a hot topic for a lot of people. Inequality. All right. The free price system indisputably. What's the word?
Indubitably.
The free price system indisputably produces unequal economic outcomes. Uh-oh. About this, the economist John Maynard Keynes said that, quote, I want to mold a society in which most of the economic inequalities and causes of inequality are removed, unquote. Such a benevolent fellow. Wants to mold society.
Yeah, fear people who want to mold you.
Most people tend to agree with this until they think through what it would mean to try to achieve it. Consider, for example, the French Revolutionary slogan, liberty, equality, fraternity. On close inspection, there is something completely illogical about this. The ideals of liberty and equality are incompatible. If people are free, they will behave differently, which will lead to different outcomes. If I save and my friend does not, in the long run, I should end up with a higher income, perhaps much higher. Should this be forbidden? And if so, how to forbid it? If government deprives us of liberty, ostensibly to enforce equality, as was done in the Soviet Union, the enforcers will themselves become a higher class with special privileges. The enforcement of an ideology of equality has produced some of the most barbarous episodes in world history. Consider the story of a group of idealistic Americans from the upper Midwest who in the 1930s decided that they did not want to live in a society propelled by greed, but would instead volunteer their services in the workers' paradise of the Soviet Union. This led them to save, hire a boat, and embark for Russia. I am not familiar with this story, are you?
Oh, my. No. I mean, I know some people who were in favor of the Soviet system ended up there and quickly realized the error of their ways, but I don't know this story in particular.
Oh, very interesting. On arrival, the volunteers were met by Soviet officials and were marched, perhaps singing socialistic songs, toward a work camp. There they were brutally enslaved and put to hard labor with little food and insufficient clothing or shelter to withstand the cold. Few are believed to have survived. Better known incidents include the massacre in Cambodia by Pol Pot of everyone with a degree of education, the extermination of the kulaks by Stalin, and the great leap forward in cultural revolution of Mao in China, in all of which many millions died. To recognize that liberty and equality are logical opposites, or to cite such episodes, does not, however, make a complete argument against the desire to find a balance where freedom is subject to rules and where we can achieve a more equal society. So it reminds me of the great Rush song, The Trees.
I love that song.
Yeah, right? So different trees are unequal heights, right? Some trees grow taller, some grow shorter. Well, that's not fair. Why should this tree be tall and this one be short? We should make them all equal. And of course, the only way you can make them equal is by hatchet, axe and saw.
Yep. That's a great song.
All right. Continuing on. None of us want to see other people in need. I absolutely agree. No objection here. Most of us think that we should try to help those who, for whatever reason, are suffering or living in abject poverty. The real problem is not lack of complete equality, but rather that some people simply do not have enough. The inescapable question is how best to go about addressing this problem. Okay, so this is an excellent point, and it's one libertarians need to start saying. So Alex Epstein is always saying, argue to 100.
Yeah.
So argue for the future vision and not negative 100, where you're just always arguing against. So stop arguing against socialism. Next time you have your conversation with your socialist friend, start the conversation with something more along this line. It's like, can we both agree that what we want is a society where people are prosperous, healthy, wealthy, wise, happy? Can we agree that's kind of the society we both want? And I think everyone's going to say, yeah, of course, that's what I want. That's why I'm a socialist. And you can say as a libertarian, that's what I want too. That's why I'm a capitalist. And so then the conversation just becomes about, we want the same thing. Now let's try to convince each other that my way is better than your way, or whatever, right? So I think that's really, really, really important that, we shouldn't go into conversations like in an argumentative way, or like, I'm against you.
You're right. In Alex Epstein's framing, argue to 100 is really smart. People should read. I think it's in Fossil Future where he makes that point. And so, yes, we should say that what we want to see, we see homeless, starving people. We don't like it either. We want that fixed. And we have a vision as to how private means are A, more moral, but B, more effective. And there's all sorts of problems with these government agencies who, again, no fiefdom wants to shrink. The last thing in the world a bureaucrat who's in charge of a homeless program wants is to solve the problem. Well, now they're out of a job. It's the last thing they would want.
Right.
But you're going to get to a point where you're arguing, because some doe-eyed socialist is just going to say, well, yeah, but what I really want is for no one to have to work and the government to give us everything, and then we can be happy and wise and surf every day. So you are going to have to confront reality at some point. But you are right that it is not an accident that people think that libertarians are just selfish, because all we talk about is what the government shouldn't do, not what private society should do and what it would do absent the government just crowding everything out.
Mm-hmm. The inescapable question is how best to go about addressing this problem. Is it to earn money and give a portion to charity, in addition to helping others get a start in the market system by educating, training, and hiring them? Or is it to restrict free prices and profits, and even to abolish the free price and profit system altogether? Okay, so those are basically the two questions, or the two sides, right, of how to solve this question. To answer this, we will have to ask what works best, but we will also need to consider morality. So kind of what you were saying there. American socialist Michael Harrington has stated that, quote, the profit system is outrageously unjust, unquote. Is this right? Are incomes determined by the free price and profit system both arbitrary and inequitable? As John Maynard Keynes asserted, so that's what John Maynard Keynes thought, that the free price and profit system was arbitrary and inequitable. It is hard to see how our incomes are in any sense arbitrary. They are determined, like everything else in the free price system, by demand and supply. Norman Van Cott has explained that, quote, our incomes, be they large, small, or somewhere in between, reflect 1, our usefulness to our fellow citizens, and 2, the case with which fellow citizens can find substitutes for us, unquote. I want to reread that one again, because I think that one's worth sinking in here. So again, this is a quote from Norman Van Cott. Our incomes, be they large, small, or somewhere in between, reflect 1, our usefulness to our fellow citizens. So get a load of that. Our usefulness to our fellow citizens. And 2, the ease with which fellow citizens can find substitutes for us. That's very interesting. And I can already see, the socialists and Marxists, you just want to replace people or whatever. But to that first point, our incomes are actually a signal that we're useful to other people. So, I mean, that's when we get paid, we're actually getting paid because we're helping others. What are we helping them with? I don't know. Buy something at a store by ringing them up at the cash register. You're helping them get something, and for that you get paid.
It's a critical point, and it's one that we don't think about. We think things like go to school or to an apprenticeship program or study a course online so that you can get skills so that you can earn money. And we just sort of gloss over or never look at the end result. What are these skills doing? Why do we get money for having skills? It's because those skills allow us to serve other people.
Right.
If you want to get rich, figure out how to help, how to give something to the most amount of people that they want for the best price. That's how to get rich.
Yep. And another, so I guess I got Walter Williams on the brain. Another thing Walter Williams said that really has always stuck with me is he said, you know what a dollar represents, or any money represents when someone pays you or you can hold it up and you can show other people. It's basically a certificate of accomplishment.
Yeah.
It is showing that you have accomplished something in life. That's what a dollar represents. That's what money represents. At least honest money, right? Whereas government money kind of represents the opposite. But all right.
It's I mean, we still even speak of it this way when we teach what money is. Part of its function is a store of value. Well, what kind of value? Well, how did you get it? You provided value to somebody else. In exchange, they gave you this. That's the store of what kind of value.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. And not just store of like physical value, but also moral value.
Absolutely. Channel your inner Ayn Rand.
Mm-hmm. All right. It is natural to object that people are not commodities. Okay, so here we go. Again, the Marxists might say you can't just substitute people. They're not things, right? You're being cold-hearted by saying, what do you mean you can substitute a factory worker or something like that? So Hunter Lewis continues, it is natural to object that people are not commodities, but our labor is not ourself. Our labor, unlike ourself, is a commodity and can be priced like any other commodity. This is not unjust. It is reality. Boom! But yeah, so, I mean, again, this is really getting to the heart of the mistake that John Locke made by introducing the labor theory of value into economics, right? And it's unfortunate because obviously for a lot of libertarians, John Locke is kind of a philosophical hero, but he absolutely made an unbelievable error by associating labor with value, in that in some way tying it to yourself. So that then was adopted by the Marxists eventually and came up, with the full-fledged labor theory of value. So for many people on the Marxist and socialist side, they cannot separate the labor from the person. To them, it is them, right? When the factory worker screws that bolt into the car on the assembly line, in some sense, they're imparting part of themselves into the car. And so then somehow that ownership of themselves transfers to the work they've done on the car, right? You see how they come up with this tie between labor and self. Whereas for us, the way we look at things, your labor is not, you don't own your labor. It's not something you own. It's something you can give away, something you can trade. It's something, but once you give it and you're paid for it, it's not yours anymore. You've sold it. Just like you might sell a used book to somebody or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Did I make sense?
I mean, yeah, since you are selling it, you do own it. But after you've made that sale, it's not something that you have some sort of a claim to.
Right.
And people like to scream, the commoditization of people, but they're just railing against reality. Mm-hmm. It does require labor to make economic valuable things, goods and services. And anyway, the chapter's long, so we should probably keep going. But
sorry folks, I keep interrupting this, but it's so good. It's so juicy. I don't know. I love this stuff so much. I get excited for it.
I don't
all right. Well, let's we'll speak. We'll just wrap. I'll finish up the chapter here. It's only a couple more pages, and then we can have some final thoughts. So, most government policies designed to alleviate the reality of labor as commodity just backfire. A minimum wage means that young people are never hired and are therefore never trained. A minimum government guaranteed income, or its equivalent in free services such as housing, food, and medicine, means that some people may not choose to be hired, which eventually will bankrupt the system. The idea that government can train workers is fanciful. Only real work can train workers. Even the best education is not real training, although it is useful if it instills basic knowledge and good personal work habits. It is also true that there is a large element of luck in this. Some of us are indeed lucky to be born with brains to attend good school. I hope I'm born with a brain. to attend good schools, or even to inherit money. All of these things make it easier to get more money. But getting money is not the only or even the most important way that we are lucky or unlucky. As economist Robert Soule has noted, quote, the difference between a factory worker and an executive is nothing compared to the difference between being born brain damaged and being born normal, or the difference between being born to loving parents rather than abusive parents, unquote. The principle of equality of opportunity does not mean that everyone has the same opportunity. Life will not permit that. It means that society should not deliberately discriminate against anyone, and it is consistent with a free price system. Indeed, a free price system logically demands it. A business owner in a free price system who refuses to serve customers or hire people based on some personal prejudice will just lose access to customers or the best employees and thereby lose ground against the competition. But if we are going to try to level all the playing fields and create a quality of outcome, where do we start? And how can we do it without robbing people of their right to live life as they see fit? For example, do you want everyone to have the same medical care? What if you personally think that the medical care in question is harmful rather than helpful? There is always a great deal of disagreement in medicine, which is the only reason there is medical progress. Will we insist on the same drug for the same malady? But is the same malady given our biological differences? Research suggests that most drugs are only effective for a minority of those who take them, because we are all very different biologically. The same drug and dose for infant, young, middle-aged, and old? If not, who will choose the drug or define the age brackets, and on what basis? In the end, any such efforts defy common sense and logic as well as our right to make our own choices about ourselves, so long as we do not aggress against or harm others. Even if this is acknowledged, some will want to restrict free prices in an effort to reduce inequality, if only a bit. Economist Arthur Okun, a chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors during the 1960s, personally favored, quote, complete economic equality, unquote. But thought that sacrificing some economic inefficiency and growth for greater equality would be a reasonable compromise. The trouble with this idea is that personal incomes are prices. When government tries to manipulate or control these prices, the result is not likely to be income. The trouble with this idea is that personal incomes are prices. When government tries to manipulate or control these prices, the result is not likely to be income redistribution. It is more likely to be wealth destruction. Wealth is not something we pick up on the beach and share among ourselves. It has to be created through hard work, investment, insight, and oversight. Schemes of redistribution just reduce or destroy it for everyone, with particularly unfortunate consequences for the poor. Wealth may be rapidly destroyed when taxed. Estate taxes take chosen investments carefully chosen over a lifetime, often by the most experienced and successful investors, and liquidate them so that government can spend more. This is not a good trade-off for the economy because private investment is the engine of job creation. Even large-scale wealth taxation would mean so many shares and properties dumped onto markets to be converted into cash that market values of all assets would collapse. The only alternative would be for the government to become the owner of the assets. The communists tried that, and it did not succeed. Another important point to keep in mind about inequality has been noted by economist Milton Friedman. Quote, nowhere is the gap between rich and poor wider, nowhere are the rich richer and the poor poorer than in those countries that do not permit the free market to operate, unquote. There is extensive evidence to support Friedman's assertion, including a notable World Bank study from economist David Dollar, what a good name, David Dollar, if you're going to be an economist.
The best.
And Art Cray. Okay. And that's the end of the chapter.
That was a lot of words, and they're all great. But the
Words.
question, so many words. But the question in the title is, what about inequality? To which I say, inequality is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, freedom is antithetical to equality.
Right.
If we are free, we are going to make different choices, which yield different outcomes. And that's to the good. That's why we prosper. That's why we thrive. It's what it means to be human. And that, as you said earlier, that doesn't mean that, we should throw rocks at the poor or be cold and insensitive to their suffering. We should try to help people, and we should try and give them the ability to start being productive in their own right. We shouldn't want to keep them dependent on welfare systems. But the last 2 pages that we just read were all about how wealth in society, how the economic engine of society is literally reduced, broken, torn apart when government tries to do the thing that private human charity is supposed to be doing. Right. All these taxation schemes and redistribution schemes, they break an economy. They rip it apart. They reduce it. And that, as he says, it hurts the poor the worst when they do that.
Right. So inequality is part of the structure of the universe we live in. Yeah. And that's just obvious if anyone stopped to think about it. Jupiter is bigger than Earth. That's not equal. The planets aren't equal sizes, right? Different stars shine brighter than others, right? That's neither good nor bad. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it works. So inequality is built into the system. I think. And rather than embrace that and say inequality is great, look at all the variety it gives us. That's maybe a better word, because inequality just has such a negative connotation. Rather than inequality, I think us libertarians could use a word like variety, the variety of life. Without inequality, there would be no variety. You would just have to eat the same food every day. Wow, that's gross. I don't want that. I want variety. What I don't want is misery, poverty, these sorts of things. So I think in people's minds, when they hear inequality, they assume that must mean poverty. That must mean if there's inequality, there must be poor people. And what I'm trying to say is, no, there doesn't have to be poor people. You can still have inequality, but like the quote-unquote poor people, right? If you're just talking in relative terms. But to me, if we had a true free market, anarcho sort of type capitalist system, everybody would be like, well, what today we would call upper middle class or above. So you still have rich people, but everybody would be, come on, pretty well off, So to me, that's not bad inequality, so...
No, you make a great point, and it hadn't occurred to me to use the word variety. That's exactly true. We should phrase it that way. After all, thinking about just how much a person earns, that doesn't tell you anything about what they do, what they offer to society. LeBron James is different than a ballerina who's different than a guy who makes me my sandwich. And, and even if they all make the same amount of money, that doesn't mean they're equal. Why are we even thinking about measuring things this way? And yeah, the point I want to close with is just that fighting against inequality with government force, it's antithetical to freedom. There's going to be a variety in outcomes if you have a free society, and you should want that.
Okay, well, we are just about done with lesson 2. One more chapter to go, chapter 9. Titled, Why Greed is Not Good in a Free Price System. Now, wait a second. I'm pretty sure that in the movie Wall Street, Michael Douglas told me greed is good. Aren't all us capitalists just greedy, Adam?
I do have to admit, I was sort of rooting for old Gecko in that speech. But of course, he was also a crook. My version of that movie that I like a lot better is called Other People's Money, starring Danny DeVito as Larry the Liquidator. And he's coming in to swoop in and purchase all the shares of some old cable company or something in the Northeast, run by
remember this
Gregory
movie.
Peck.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's just this New York vulture played by the, short, fat, disgusting Danny DeVito. And it's this noble, virtue, family-run business that's being beset upon by this evil guy. And then he comes into the shareholders meeting and gives a speech that I'd almost be willing to just devote an episode of the show to just reading. And he talks about how, we have fiber optics now. What are you guys doing clinging to this business? I bet the last horse and buggy, company or buggy whip manufacturer made the best darn buggy whip in the planet. But those people are gone now. And, you need to, he says what we need to do is what we talk about all the time. This is a profit and loss system. This company needs to change. All the resources that are being used in this dying business need to be released into the economy to do something productive. It's a great speech. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so why greed is not quote unquote good in a free price system. Okay. We have already seen that the price system encourages us to value or at least accept change, but it teaches us much more besides. It also teaches us to work hard, to defer gratification, to save rather than spend on ourselves. As a corollary of this, it encourages us to be patient, to keep our eyes fixed on the long term, which means decades at least, not just the short term. For example, if I start a business with $50,000 in initial sales and grow this at a fairly rapid 15% a year, it will take 18 years to reach $400,000. In another 18 years, sales will reach 3.2 million. In another 18 years, 25.6. If I survive for another 18 years, I will see $205 million. As these numbers suggest, for a long time, the business will seem to be progressing at a snail's pace. But if the growth rate can be maintained, the compounding of even larger numbers will produce stupendous returns. One more 18 years to compound, and the business will have grown to 1.6 billion in annual sales. The founders of McDonald's and Coca-Cola sold out in the first few years and thus missed a chance to become enormously rich. The lesson is clear. Have faith, stick with it, and do not let the first money you earn go to your head. What else does... Well, hold on, Adam, let me pause there. That's good advice for us because, when we're raking in that big podcast money, don't let it go to your head, Adam. We got to stay strong. Keep the show going.
As listeners and viewers, I'm sure will agree, my head is tiny.
In another 500,000 episodes, I might be able to pay for my car repair. So just keep going, man. Just keep going. All right. What else does the price system teach us? Critics say that it teaches us to be selfish and greedy. Okay, let me. That's such a key because that really is what our modern culture is teaching us, right? Greed is good. Profits, capitalism, greed. All right. What else does the price system teach us? Critics say that it teaches us to be selfish and greedy. Is that true?
It is not.
The philosopher and novelist Ayn Rand. Hey, it's almost as if you're predicting this. A famous defender of free markets would have answered, certainly, and a good thing at that. Whoa. Ayn, what are you doing? Rand assumed that everyone is greedy and that free markets directed aggression into constructive channels. This is not a new idea. Samuel Johnson, 18th century wise man and wit, suggested that. Wise man and wit. That sounds like a brand of jeans or clothing line or something. Wise man and wit. Or a law firm. I don't know. All right. Economics is making me a little punch drunk
giddy.
or something.
Yeah, okay. You love it so much.
I love it so much. All right. Samuel Johnson suggested that, quote, there are a few ways in which a man can be more innocently employed than in getting money, unquote. Economist John Maynard Keynes quipped, quote, it is better that a man tyrannize over his bank balance than over his fellow citizens, unquote. Keynes was not a proponent of the greed is good school, but did state that, quote, avarice and usury must be our gods for a little longer still, for only they can lead us out of the tunnel of economic necessity into daylight, unquote. 18th century economist Adam Smith offered a memorable defense, not of greed, but of rational self-interest, which does not seek to take from others what is rightfully theirs, when he declared that, quote, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. We address ourselves, not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. He generally, unquote. Oh, no, sorry, that wasn't unquote. He generally indeed neither intends to promote the public interest nor knows how much he is promoting it. He intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention, unquote. The motivational speaker Zig Ziglar turned this into some useful personal advice. Quote, you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want, unquote. Adam Smith went on to argue that, quote, whenever commerce is introduced into any country, probity, punctuality, Adam Smith went on to argue that, quote, whenever commerce is introduced into any country, probity, punctuality, economy, industry, and discretion always accompany it. These virtues in a rude and barbarous country are almost unknown, unquote. You know, that's really that is really, really deep. You know, I say all the time, Adam, that sound money makes for sound people, or I also put it, honest money makes honest people, and corrupt money makes a corrupt people, right? And so you really see this, you know, in countries or societies that are totally corrupt, totally bankrupt. They have no, you know, solid economic foundation. It's a barbarous society. It's brutal, you know.
Think about what is required for you to put yourself together to be in such a position so that you can create value for somebody else, for an employer.
Mm-hmm.
It requires you to understand and practice a whole host of personal virtues. You know, you're making yourself a better person, and you're adding value to the world for which you'll be remunerated. And people look at that and say, yeah, that's just greed we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, it isn't. I mean, you can take the love for money to make it pathological, obviously, but we have other things that we're interested in other than money, unless we're deranged.
Yeah.
And as you were just saying, look at this free price economy where you have to be of service to get rich. Makes yourself a better person, makes the society better. You lower the time preference of the entire society as you lower your own time preference. And as he's remarking, this is where civilization comes from.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So don't decry it and don't call it greed. That's obnoxious.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That's where civilization comes from. Let me make it even a bolder statement. Without capitalism, there would be no civilization.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? It's not as if, 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, people thought of capitalism. They were capitalists, right? That's a term that was invented later to describe a way of investing in society. All capitalism is basically, if you just want to reduce it to one sentence, it's investing in capital goods. What are capital goods? Let me just use a different word. Durable goods. It's time preference. It's putting off the pleasures of today to invest instead your resources today for a payoff down the road. So that capitalism, you can just change the word capitalism to investmentalism, I guess, if you want a less politically charged word. But basically, when someone built a house, that was capitalism. They were investing resources into a durable good, making an investment for the future, for their family. And then the next generation, the son or children, inherited the house. They added on to the house. So the capital grew, they invested. And over time, you build and build and build and build. You form societies this way. You form communities and neighborhoods and cities. And this is how society is, through capital investment. Capital just means something you can physically hold in your hand, really, is a capital investment.
It gets, that effect is stronger the richer your understanding of capitalism gets, because as we understand it, it involves a legal system where free association is protected and private property is protected. Well, that's the only system in which capital can grow, right?
Right.
If you're constantly having to spend all your time defending what's yours from the mobs who want to take it from you,
right.
How in the world can civilization grow in that situation? Right. It can't.
Yep. Constantly warring tribes or societies. They're just constantly building, destroying. They're not getting anywhere. Or societies that are completely hedonistic, right? They spend everything like they grow grapes, and instead of preserving some to eat during the winter, they just eat them all now, or turn it all into wine right away and drink it all, and save nothing for the future, right? So very short-sighted, and they quickly die off.
And it's a point you make all the time, and you're right. Our society is leaning in that direction.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the unsound money.
That's right.
People wonder, I just use the analogy, spending all your time trying to protect what you have from the barbarous hordes, but you get the exact same civilization-destroying effect when you're afraid to invest in the future because you think inflation is going to rob from you, just like the barbarous hordes would have. You get the exact same increasing in time preference and slow destruction of civilization.
Yeah. What's the point of saving for the future when your money's going to be worthless 20 years from now? I might as well spend it on a vacation now.
Yep.
So, okay. But according to Smith, it is rational self-interest that promotes these personal and civic virtues. Could Rand, Keynes, and even Smith be mistaken about the values taught by the free price system? Yes. This system is not teaching us to be greedy or even directing that greed into more constructive channels, nor is it only promoting rational self-interest. It is instead teaching us to stop thinking about our own needs and wishes and start focusing on the needs and wishes of others, in particular our employees and customers. If we try to do this only from rational self-interest, we will not find it easy. If we care genuinely about others and about our contributions to society, it will be much easier to stay the course, which typically is very long and demanding. A brash young entrepreneur may think he is entering business to become rich or famous or enjoy life, but he will soon learn that the rewards are distant and uncertain, while the personal sacrifices are immediate. Most people do not like to work 7 days a week watch every penny of personal expense, or give up control over their own time. We have already seen that a boss of a successful business is not just a boss, but also a willing servant of others. Someone may fake this attitude for a while, but will ultimately be found out. Predation, exploitation, parasitism, all of these may augment the profits of a single transaction or a single year. But the worth of a business is defined as the present value of all future profits. And in a free price system, free of government-created and protected monopolies, predatory practices do not amplify, but rather destroy future profits. If a business owner must put the needs of employees and customers first, what about competitors? Is not market competition a cutthroat, dog-eat-dog business, with predation the rule rather than the exception? Once again, this is a false picture. Most competition takes place within an organized, cooperative framework similar to the Olympics. Oh, the Olympics, Adam. Whoa, we should have why isn't business in the Olympics? You can have, right? You can have, whatever, I don't know. Olympic athletes can be as competitive as they like, but must conform to the rules of fair competition, which also include no collusion, or they will lose their medals, as some have done. In some cases, business competition is much more collegial than sports. Wheat farmers, for example, technically compete with one another, but think of themselves as colleagues, not competitors. Competitors in other industries may behave differently. In any case, there is only one durable way to outcompete other firms, and that is to serve your employees and through them your customers better and better. This is the only true competitive advantage. Anything else is ephemeral. Young people sometimes eschew business and enter government or the nonprofit sector because they want to make the world a better place. But if they consider, they will realize that businesses exist to meet the tangible needs of people, just as government and nonprofits do. And of course, some people enter public service for anything but altruistic reasons. They may be attracted by the lure of fame or power rather than money. Values inculcated by the free market price system are demanding. They often take generations to learn. Once learned, they make the world not only a more productive place, but a better place in which to live. It is not surprising that proponents of the free price system led the battle against world slavery in the 18th and 19th centuries. And they were not only opposed to slavery, they were also opposed to nationalism, tribalism, racism, and sectarianism as well. The free price system teaches us to tolerate, work with, and ultimately appreciate people of all lands and conditions. If we do not, we will lose our best employees and many potential customers. As noted before, this is not just a matter of calculation. Either we believe it or we do not. In the long run, people will not be fooled. Economist George Stigler understands all this. Quote, important as the moral influences of the marketplace are, they have not been subjected to any real study. The immense proliferation of general education, of scientific progress, and of democracy are all coincidental in time and place with the emergence of the free enterprise system of organizing the marketplace. I believe this coincidence was not accidental, unquote. Economist Jeffrey Martin Hodgson does not understand free price system values. Quote, the firm has to compete not simply for profit, but for our confidence and trust. To achieve this, it has to abandon profit maximization or even shareholder satisfaction as the exclusive objectives of the organization, unquote. This is hopelessly wrong. The only way we can maximize profits is to earn the confidence and trust of our customers. These two activities are not mutually exclusive. They are one in the same. Economist John Kenneth Galbraith, past president of the American Economic Association and best-selling author, also demonstrates a complete lack of understanding when he writes that, quote, "There is nothing reliable to be learned about making money. If there were, study would be intense and everyone with a positive IQ would be rich," unquote. But it is not a high IQ or a business degree that enables us to make money. It is a strong desire to serve others, not just ourselves, along with sound judgment about how to go about it. Since, in business as in life, good intentions are not enough. Thus ends lesson 2 of economics in 3 lessons. So, some final summaries on that last chapter there, Adam?
Well, first of all, thank you for reading all that. You did yeoman's work there.
I do it for you, Adam. I do it for our listeners. I'm doing it for others, man.
That's right. So you should be rolling in the dough. I don't have too much to pile on there. Most of the points I wanted to make, I made throughout the section. I will say that when I was going to business school, I got a finance degree in 92, they were starting to make that switch away from teaching managers that you're not supposed to be serving the shareholders, maximizing the stock price, which, as he says, is supposed to be the net present benefit of all future cash flows. Mm-hmm. But instead, balance the interests of various quote-unquote stakeholders, which are your customers, sure, your shareholders, I guess, but also your employees, the people who tax you. I mean, they would literally tell you have to consider the government as one of the stakeholders. And this is all terrible and backwards. I rebelled against it and became a poker player right out of school. And it's finally, I don't know if they're still teaching that, but the way to encapsulate that vision is you don't want to be short-term fixated on, maximizing the stock price for a quarter or something.
Mm-hmm. Right.
To do that is myopic. And it turns out that the best way to maximize shareholder value is to correctly make sure your employees are happy so that your customers are happy and your suppliers are happy. It is true that you have to conduct yourself nobly in an ecosystem and take everybody else's interests into consideration, because that is how you get filthy rich. It was a false distinction that they were making to me in the early 90s, and we need to unlearn that lesson.
Yep. Okay, so thanks for tuning in, folks. I'm sure you're probably asleep by now.
For those few of you who stuck with us for this whole thing, you guys are troopers. We love you. We will be back tackling Lesson 3 next time after we give you all a much-deserved rest. So thank you, Tyrone. That was awesome. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and catch you next time on Haman Nature.